The process of denazification and derussification has begun in Europe. While Putin is on a submarine pontificating about how he will pressure and defeat someone, Europeans have started to take down pro-Kremlin figures. A French court sentenced the old friend of the pale dictator, Marine Le Pen, to 4 years.
The leader of the French far-right was indeed sentenced to a fine 4 years of imprisonment and was also banned from running for public office for 5 years.
Le Pen, in the best traditions of Moscow's friends and agents, is the leader of a far-right party that opposes the European Union, European values, and blames migrants for all problems.
Marine Le Pen promises to immediately expel Islamists from the country if she wins the presidential election.
For years, Le Pen and her minions have been trying to dismantle the EU from within and promote Russian barbaric narratives. Le Pen supported the annexation of Crimea and fought for the lifting of anti-Russian sanctions. She repeated word for word the nonsense of Russian propaganda that Crimea has always been Russian and that Ukraine was illegally holding it.
In Ukraine, Marine Le Pen's statement recognizing the annexation of Crimea was called absurd. The French presidential candidate and Vladimir Putin's ally stated in an interview with the Russian newspaper Izvestia that if she wins the election, she will recognize Crimea as part of Russia.
Interestingly enough, in 2014, her party received a loan of 9 million euros from a Czech Russian bank.
Coincidence? I don't think so.
Even in 2022, after the full-scale invasion, Le Pen continued to insist that Crimea is Russian, although she reluctantly condemned the attack on Ukraine. Apparently, even her devoted followers were shocked by Moscow's actions.
According to my information, this is enemy number one.
Even when the Russians threatened to wipe Paris off the face of the earth, Le Pen refused to call Putin a dictator and opposed sending weapons to Ukraine and its joining NATO and the EU. She claimed it was a provocation and escalation against Russia, but calls to destroy the 2 million-strong capital of France are considered normal, a working proposal.
So we must enter Paris and never withdraw our troops from there again. Fools! They launched it in French over Paris to show them bastards. Well, there's no need to even talk about Germany. Wipe it off the face of the earth.
Naturally, those who continue to support Putin and Russia in France after such statements start to smell bad, much like Gérard Depardieu.
The meeting with the regional leadership and cultural figures for French actor and director Gérard Depardieu began with surprises for strengthening cultural ties and contributing to folk culture. Depardieu was awarded the title of honorary citizen of the Chechen Republic.
No one was surprised that a character like Le Pen turned out to be a common thief and corrupt individual. She was convicted not for her love of Putin, which also deserves a separate article, but for the simple embezzlement of European Parliament funds, where Marischka was a member.
Marine Le Pen left the courthouse in the city of Paris in the early afternoon before the verdict was fully read. The scenario she herself called her political death became a reality for her on March 31st.
The court found that Le Pen and 23 other members of her party illegally used about 4 million euros intended for paying parliamentary assistance and funding party activities in France. An oxymoron occurred. The far right committed communism. Ironic. As a result, Le Pen was sentenced to 4 years in prison, 2 of which are suspended and fined 100,000 euros. But most importantly, Putin's girlfriend with low social responsibility is banned from holding elected positions for 5 years, which excludes her from participating in the 2027 presidential elections. The mustached Kremlin fool, of course, bleated in support of Le Pen, which once again confirms that she is chipped by the Russian world. When Le Pen serves her sentence, she won't be left without a job. Gazprom is no longer an option. By that time, it will have completely gone bankrupt. But a position as a bathhouse attendant in Gelendzhik is guaranteed for her. Mikhalich, and we thought it was a bear. Le Pen wasn't the only one in the free world to get a fork. Other European fans of matryoshkas and balalaikas also lined up for a thrashing. The first to get a slap was the Slovak Prime Minister Fico. He complained that the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, called him and yelled at him for half an hour over his covert negotiations with Trump. They should ban phone calls in the European Commission.
Today, I spoke on the phone with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. We discussed two topics. The first topic was the tariffs that were imposed against us. She scolded me terribly. Robert, what have you done? Why on earth did you conduct such negotiations with Trump? Are you out of your mind? She berated me for half an hour and called me a complete idiot.
If the tolerant officials of the European Union call someone an idiot, it means that this person is at least an idiot to the 10th degree. And at most, something that is forbidden to mention by YouTube's rules. Well, you get me, guys. Fico then came out to the press and stated that he was joking, and no one called him an idiot. But as they say, there's a grain of truth in every joke. You can't leave him home alone. He'll mess up everything. But he's good, makes funny faces. Viktor Orban might also be preparing a backup airfield in Rostov. The future Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has issued a black mark to Hungary. He stated that the new German government will seek to stop EU funding to Hungary and demands to strip Budapest of its voting rights in the European Union.
Any country in the EU tells us that we must bring one of the Visegrad Group countries to its knees. This dictatorship must be stopped, stated Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban while assuming the presidency.
Punishing Hungary for anti-European activities is not Merz's personal desire. It is a coalition decision of the political forces that won the elections in Germany. They propose to tighten the European Union's measures against countries that violate the key principles of the EU. Considering the repeated accusations of undermining democratic norms, separate negotiations with Moscow, blocking military and financial aid to Ukraine, undermining European security, and accusing the European Union of tyranny and colonial policies, we are talking about the country of goulash and funny vests.
The empire does not want to help Ukraine, but to colonize it in any conceivable and imaginable way. The means of colonization is war, or rather, a military conflict. The rulers of Europe have decided that Ukraine must continue the war no matter the cost.
It seems someone has talked themselves into European isolation. Now Orban has launched active anti-Ukrainian propaganda in the EU and is planning to hold a referendum on whether to accept Kiev into the European Union or not. In Hungary, a real campaign has unfolded to scare the population about Ukraine. They say that in Ukraine, no vaccinations are given and everyone is contagious, that they grow genetically modified products there, which are sprayed with chemicals. And also Ukraine is a center of organized crime. Plus, Kiev will take away the 13th salary from all Hungarians.
Yes, seriously. You didn't believe it? Didn't believe it, right?
All this propaganda backfired against Hungary itself and its alternatively gifted government. Civilized Europeans asked a reasonable question. Why do they need such an inadequate relative in their family? Who is ready to sell the entire continent for cheap Russian gas? It went off to the side. And the main question, why do Hungarians themselves need such a government? And this question Hungarians have already started asking Orban and his homunculi.
On the anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution, more than 50,000 people took to the streets of Budapest demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
And as a final touch, another Kremlin tin soldier who heeded the phrase "suitcase station Russia." The leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Milorad Dodik, who was accused in Bosnia and Herzegovina of encroaching on the constitutional order, fled to Moscow. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and barred from political activity for 6 years. Dodik stated that he did not flee, but simply arrived early for the EU's May 9th celebrations. It's very convenient to arrive for May 9th on April 1st. On May 9th, he will have such a hangover that he will be showcased at the parade as a weapon of mass destruction.
I have arrived in Moscow. Every time I am here, I start with a visit to the Tomb of the Unknown, soldier to honor the memory of the 28 million Russians who died during World War II.
That's exactly where Dodik belongs. We hope he stays for the New Year's celebration as well. Europe will definitely be better off without such characters, and Russia will finally turn into a Dodik reserve called Country 404.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.